Hello and welcome to Jazz Piano Daily number 122. Today I'm going to talk to you about the number one difficulty I have found that students have improvising at the piano. And it might surprise you, it really has nothing to do with the right hand. It's really all about the left hand. So I have a sheet here that you can go ahead and download as a Jazz Piano Daily member. And this is a good thing just to kind of print off and have in your repertoire book or by your piano. So let's go through this bullet point one by one. The first thing is make sure that you start with a simple accompaniment first, right? So do your simple accompaniments first. Make sure that you could create an improvisation over them, and then make sure you can get to about 80 to 90% proficiency. All right, so what I mean by that is we're doing this B-flat blues, where we're doing the bass line, we're doing the 3-note, the 4-note rootless chords, and in tomorrow's lesson, I'm going to start breaking down a solo. We're going to create a solo and all of that. All right, so now if we're going to improvise in the right hand, we're going to like... All right, so if I'm going to improvise in the right hand, if my left hand is not completely steady and I'm able to play it almost without thinking about it, then it's going to be very difficult for me to improvise in my right hand. All right, so what I'm saying here is the better you get at your accompaniments in your left hand, the easier it's going to be able to play and improvise in the right hand. Because the reality is this, if I'm going to be playing a bass line, right? So if I'm going to play a bass line, or I'm going to be doing rootless chords, or I'm going to be doing like a, kind of a stride thing, whatever it is, if I have to think about that left hand a lot, I'm not going to be able to really focus on my right hand and think about what I want to play in the right hand, okay? Because remember, you can only really think about one hand at a time. You can't really be mentally focusing on both hands simultaneously. All right, next thing. Create a library of accompaniment patterns and try improvising over each. So that could be simple bass lines, like a half-note bass line. Right, so simpler bass lines, or even, right, we talked about that bass line way back in the beginning of Jazz Piano Daily as well, right? So a simple bass line, or maybe it's doing chord shells. Even simple root 7s, root 3s, whatever it is. The point is this, make sure that you can improvise over each of them. What I have found over the years is typically students are like, oh, I want to get right into that. I want to get right into the bass line and doing all of that, or like rootless chords. And do all of that, and then guess what? What ends up happening is that they end up falling short because the left hand accompaniment, they don't really have it down yet, all right? So then they're trying to focus on the right hand, and it all falls apart. So start with some simple accompaniments first. That could be simple shells. And you might say, yeah, whatever, Willie, I got that down. Great, test yourself. Can you do it? Or is it the kind of thing where you try playing it? Whoops. Right, and you're hunting and pecking for all of this stuff. If that's the case, that means you really don't have it down well. So I encourage you to really test yourself and make sure that you have down the accompaniment well before you move on to the next one. All right, next one. Move the accompaniments into new keys. Okay, there I am in the key of B flat. What about the key of A flat? Doing the shells. All right, so can I play it in A flat? Can I go into F sharp, into G? Try playing those accompaniments in new keys, especially when you learn the bass lines. The bass lines are great to move into new keys because as you move into new keys with the bass line, you're going to realize that Two things. Number one, you're going to realize that different keys afford you different possibilities in terms of fingering, right? So some keys are a little bit easier to get your fingers around, while others are a little bit more challenging. The other thing that it's going to give you is that you're really going to start to understand how these bass lines are created when you move them into a new key. All right, so moving into a new key, that's the next tip. All right, so now, what happens if you change styles? Do you have accompaniment patterns for that style? So let's say I want to do, let's say we'll move to an F blues, and I want to do it in more of a Latin feel. So, right, so can I move it into a Latin feel? Can I do something? Right? Do I have a bass line down here? What if I'm doing chords? Do I know what to do in the right hand in terms of swinging it or playing it straight? So the thing is, figure out like what happens when you move to a different style with your accompaniment. Does it fall apart? Like what if you want to do like a shuffle? What about a slow blues? What happens with the left hand when you move into those different styles? Test yourself there. And if you find that, okay, well, like when I play in a jazz style, I'm okay, but when I go to like that shuffle style, it all falls apart. Or if I do like a slow blues, it falls apart. Or if I switch from, say, jazz into like, say, a funk thing. What happens when you move into those different styles? That's a good question to ask yourself so that you don't find yourself in a situation which is like, okay, yeah, I can improvise, I can play the blues, I can play whatever, I have some accompaniments, but then I have to move into another style and I'm doing that on the bandstand or, in a performance and it all falls apart. So be sure to check yourself there as well. What happens about when you move in between accompaniment patterns, all right? So again, taking that shuffle. So I'm just doing this simple shuffle pattern down there. Well, now what happens if I then move into my bass line? So can I move from bass line into a shuffle pattern or into shells? Like it doesn't matter what the accompaniment is, but what happens when you move in between those accompaniment patterns? Now, one tip for you, typically when playing like something like a blues or even over a standard or whatnot, you're not going to switch accompaniment patterns every couple of measures. It's going to sound really kind of a little bit odd, right? So typically, like let's take the 12-bar blues. Try playing the whole 12-bar blues using one accompaniment pattern. Then go through and try doing a different accompaniment pattern. Then try doing a different one. What you will notice is that when you go through and do these different accompaniment patterns, it also creates kind of a new sound. So it allows you to have some kind of new ideas, without really changing any of your ideas in the right hand. For instance, let's say I'm going to use that F blues scale, and I'm going to start with my shells. All right, so I'm just doing my simple shells, 4 to the floor. Bass line. shuffle pattern. So what happens when you move in between those different accompaniment patterns? And you see how the right hand, I'm really not doing much different in terms of the elements and ingredients that I'm using, but by changing around that left hand accompaniment, kind of gives some new breath to it each time I go through it. Finally, some accompaniment pattern ideas. Shells, right? Root 7, root 3 shells, 3-note rootless chords. We just talked about that yesterday. 4-note rootless chords, okay? Bass lines. Doing half notes. Or quarter note bass lines. Shuffle pattern. All right. Kind of like the boogie kind of stuff, right? Whatever accompaniment pattern you want to do. Arpeggiated, if you want to do like more of a, kind of like maybe new agey or... Right, so whatever the accompaniment pattern it is, create a library for yourself and make sure that you could do those accompaniments in different keys, different styles, different tempi as well. So try moving the tempo around, right? So anyway, hopefully you kind of understand from this lesson that, it's all about accompaniments, right? Where a lot of students go wrong is they focus all of their improvisational energy on the right hand. They think it's all about the right hand. What scale do I use? What rhythm do I use? What's the pattern that I use? And they completely forget about the left hand. And I'm here to tell you that the left hand adds just as much emphasis, if not even more, than the right hand. A bad accompaniment in the left hand will drag down your improvisation. Right? So really think about what I've said here in this lesson and really ask yourself some of those hard questions. Do I really know my accompaniments? Do I really have this accompaniment at 80 to 90% proficiency? That means that yes, you will make mistakes from time to time, but those mistakes should be a little bit more rare than common. And then also ask yourself, can I play those simple accompaniments? Can I do a half note bass line over a blues? You might think, oh yeah, I got it. Okay, sit down and try doing it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Right, so can you play that bass line? And then can you improvise over it? Can you go to quarter notes? Can you do the shuffle? Can you do the shells? Make sure that you could do all of those. I have found, I've been teaching for years, and what I've found is so often, especially adult students, they're like, oh yeah, I got it. All right, go ahead and do it. Yeah, okay, they go ahead and do it, and they fall flat, right? So if you can't do the simple stuff, then why in God's name would you think that you'd be able to do the more difficult stuff, right? It's just, you're not going to be able to. It's going to be incredibly difficult for you to be able to do rootless chords and then more complicated bass lines if you can't do the simple stuff. So not saying don't do the complicated stuff, but make sure you really have that simple stuff down before you move on to the complicated stuff. The last thing I will tell you this is that simple, like the shells, half note bass line, all that, that also comes in handy, especially as the tempo gets faster. If someone's like, okay, we're going to do a B flat blues. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Right, so if you're going to change and that tempo has to be fast and you got to play it in this fast tempo, having those half-note bass lines and the ability to go down to something that is more simplified helps you in your improvisation. Right? You want to have like a nice library of accompaniment patterns at your disposal. All right, so anyway, that's it. I'll see you guys in the next lesson. To get the first 45 pages of music for free, just go back to jazzpianodaily.com. If you liked the video, please be sure to click the like button and also subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. To watch the rest of the lessons in this series, just click on the playlist to the right of this arrow. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.